Hello and welcome to another episode of eDiscovery Chicks, the podcast about all things eDiscovery and legal tech. Hosted by two gals who hereby pledge not to leave this job anytime soon. So no preservation required for us. That's Bree.
And that's Angie. So today is going to be part 2 of our eDiscovery Playbook series. Why are we doing this? Well, okay, here's the thing. We're in our 3rd season now. Can you believe that? 3 years of glorious bliss in eDiscovery land.
And we love
And
each other more than ever.
we do. And we learned so much about each other through this podcast. But the feedback that we have received from some of our flock is I really love the more fundamental e-discovery podcasts that you guys have done where I get to learn all kinds of stuff because I understand it whenever you talk about it. Can you do more of that, please? So that is the reason why we decided to do this playbook series. We're trying to have some fundamentals here. And of course, we have other episodes with all different kinds of shenanigans because we just can't help ourselves. But today is part 2, and we are going to be talking about litigation holds, what triggers them, why you need them, what they ought to contain, and some pitfalls when it comes to putting information on hold. And as a reminder, by the way, we do listen to feedback. I just proved it by this episode and the fact that we're here.
Look at
So
that. We can make change.
we're going to be asking for subscribers soon. So we'd love to have you subscribe to the Discovery Checks, but you should follow us in the meantime and talk to us. We want to know what you want to hear. Before we get started talking about litigation holds, though, Angie, I'm scared to ask how you are doing today.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I think I'd be doing a lot better if all of our listeners would subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening and also give us a 5-star rating. But then,
Wow.
so if you want to give yours truly a little pick me up, that'd do it. But I am battling, I don't know if it's like that cyclospora thing or like a norovirus situation. But let's just put it this way. It's bleak.
This is about the 4th time that we have put a calendar invite on our calendars to record, and we're gonna hope that Angie can make it through this
It's me.
session.
Hi, I'm the problem.
No, you're not the problem. It's whatever's invaded your body.
Oh
Um,
God, some demon. You were
yeah, I need
traveling. You were on the road right now. You had to take your microphone in a suitcase for me because I
I
couldn't get it
know.
together earlier this week.
Well, it actually, on accident, made me kinda look like a badass because one of my colleagues was like, "Oh my god, you're so annoying. You check your bags all the time." I'm like, "That's right, because I wanna walk through the airport without a whole lot of stuff, like, weighing me down, and I hate the whole, like, rigmarole of, like, is there space, and where's my suitcase, and then everybody's hitting each other in the head with their freaking stuff." I'm like, "I would rather just have a very simple backpack, and that's all I have to keep up with." But this
Yeah.
time, I got to say, plus, I had to bring all the podcast equipment. I had to have my microphone and my headset. So, yeah, I'm a movie star, baby.
Yeah, my co-host
Um,
is praying to the porcelain gods a lot these days, so I take my stuff on the road.
I did not include that part.
Oh, well, feel free. I've now just told all 7 continents, basically.
But then, like, the joke was on me because my friend, so he was, like, annoyed because he had to go to the baggage claim with me to get my bag. And I bought this really cute bag from 3 years ago. It was cute, which was like this very light blue, kind of minty greenish color. That was the worst decision that you could ever make because anytime that that bag has traveled, it has been, like, pushed around, thrown around. It has all these black and blue and brown smears all over it, like, it's the ugliest suitcase ever, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, Miss VIP with a piece of shit bag," like,
Oh, no.
I'm like, "I know, I need to get a new suitcase so bad, but it still works." Like, I'm gonna use
Right, you're
it.
like, it's not broken enough to make me get a new one. Suitcases are expensive too.
They are, and then I'm always afraid I'm gonna get one that's gonna be like that bad one at the grocery store with the jacked up wheels that doesn't really roll well.
And
Like, no.
you would get that
Yeah,
one.
yes, I would.
Yeah,
But
that would happen to you.
so, anyway,
I
I'm
had to go
here
in to get my ankle x-rayed today because I thought I fractured it a few weeks ago, and my podiatrist, who I know shockingly well because I broke my other ankle, was like, "So, how'd this happen?" And I was like, "Well, Fred. It was a Monday morning, and I wore cute little heels to a doctor's appointment to get my tick bite checked out. And then when I was walking downstairs reading tick paperwork, I sprained the bejesus out of my ankle. But the reason I haven't been in to see you before that is because I then followed that up with a horrible cold that laid me flat for a few days. And then I thought it'd be fun to get some sort of butt parasite. And so here I am. And he was like, good to see you again.
Yeah, like, from between the 2 of us, Angie's, like, super tiny. I could fit her in my pocket. She's just the cutest little body. That body has been through so much in the last 2 months. Like, I'm feeling for you, friend.
Dude, I'm wasting away. My wrist bones are
I'm
poking
sure.
out.
Oh, no. We gotta get some food in you. I wish I could contribute to your cause.
I am trying, man. Popsicles are my bestie right now.
This is just so we know, this is what we're gonna be like when we're 90 and we're in the nursing home together. "What happened to
Oh,
you this week?"
except we're gonna run that bingo table.
Oh, I didn't even tell you. My son was so there's this thing called Singo Bingo at our local pub that we go to because we're really terrible parents and we take our kid to the pub. But anyway, Singo Bingo is so cool because they give you a bingo card that's got all the names of all these songs on it. And then they actually play snippets of the song. As they play the song, you find the title and then you stamp on the bingo card. But anyway, there was a game going on when we walked in, and the person next to us won $1,000, and he was like, "What? I'm totally playing this. Like, what is going on?" So the next round was for $300, but you had to pay like 20 bucks to play. So I gave him 20 bucks. He got a card for him, got a card for me. We sat there and played. This little stinker got bingo and wins $300. So
Wait, what? He's richer than all of us now.
I know, and then we had to talk him into, like, "Well, that's actually my money because I paid for you. You were just helping me with my card." And he was like, "What? I don't think so. I need $300, man." We agreed to split it, but he's like, "Okay, so after I get my new game controller, because of course it has to be something for the Xbox, I'm saving $20 and we're going to Singo Bingo next week." I'm like, "Oh god, now he's
You
gonna have a
you gave him a
habit."
gambling problem.
I know.
Well, don't worry. He'll go nicely with my 4.5-year-old. Her impetus for figuring out how to get into the fridge and like get her own food is so that she can eat booze cherries.
Oh,
So she dead ass like got a stool, opened the fridge, found the Luxardo cherries in the
oh
fridge.
my god.
I
That's
found her with like a spoon eating them, and I was like, no.
so we got a drunk and a gambler
Yeah, that's great.
before they
We're
even
great.
get to high
Our
school.
parenting is great. Follow us for parenting advice.
You're right. Alright, well, maybe we'll
Uh,
we'll give you better advice when it comes to litigation holds.
yeah. Well, speaking of being triggered, hey,
I see
let's
what you
talk
did
about lit
there.
holds. Yeah, okay, we're gonna kick this off. That was a very forced transition, but I'm gonna roll with it. We're gonna start this off talking about triggers and holds. What starts the clock? When do you need to issue a legal hold? Because the legal standard is reasonable anticipation of litigation. That's what law school teaches you, right? But it's not really a bright line. What does that actually mean? In my experience, anyways, it's a total judgment call, and judgment calls made by different people on different days with different risk tolerances produce different answers, which is precisely the category of inconsistency that'll come back to haunt you. And it's why we had a playbook when I was in house that set out standards for when to issue a legal hold. So, your playbook, if your org has one, needs to make that call for your organization in advance, not in the moment and not by whoever happens to be holding the phone when the complaint lands. When I was in house, the tricky things weren't when you got a subpoena or when a complaint was filed against you. It was always the edge cases, right? You've got an employee report. You've got an executive who mentions offhand that a former employee seemed angry. You've got some mutterings in the press about something. Those are the cases where it becomes a little bit fuzzier and where you probably want to have some standards in place for how to document those decisions.
And something that's worth noting, especially when we consider the playbook, and if you'll remember from our first episode where we talked about what the heck a playbook is, this is the place where you wanna consider everything that would or could happen that you've experienced as an organization and make a note of how you're gonna deal with that next time that it happens, which means we've gotta deal with the problem of what happens when we have an issue that pops up and we're like, "Nah, I don't know if this is like for real, or maybe it's super duper sensitive and we don't need the whole company to be spilling the tea about whatever the investigation is, especially if it doesn't amount to any wrongdoing. So when we find ourselves in this gap between we might have a problem and we definitely have a problem, is a lot of times where things can kind of break down in your playbook. The reason is a lot of times in this gap, attorneys are scared to issue that legal hold because they're like, oh, I don't want anybody to know that this is even happening until we have to let them know it's happening. So they neglect the legal hold notice procedure, they do not preserve data, etc.
Funny, I was
Now,
always scared in the opposite direction, like, the littlest thing happened, and I think I'm really trigger happy, and I'd be like, "It's your hold."
we have to figure out if we have a situation like this, how do we address it? Things like silent holds or having illegal owning processes for preservation in place, things like that might help ease the concern of publicly airing the company's dirty laundry if that's what the attorneys are concerned about.
And Bree, can you tell the people what a silent hold is?
Yes, a silent hold is when a legal hold is issued without the custodians or custodian without their knowledge. And so there's a legal hold if Angie is we think that she's actually faking her trip and fall.
God,
and
I wish I
um
was.
and we're investigating that. We don't want her to know because we don't want her mad at us especially when we find out that she wasn't making it. So we're going to issue a legal hold for our records purposes, and we're going to issue a legal hold to implement in place preservation. So her data is not going anywhere, but it's silent because Angie doesn't know about it and she doesn't have to acknowledge it. So that's what we mean by a silent hold. Thank you for the question,
Oh my
Princess
God, you're
Donut.
welcome.
Another reason why attorneys are hesitant to issue legal hold and put that preservation in place is that they feel the need to keep investigating. Unfortunately, that is not really a preservation defense when we're like, I don't know, Your Honor, we wanted to investigate a little bit more before we actually thought that there was a problem. Then we issued our legal holds.
Which, like, I kind
Um,
of get because, we're trained to really be sure before we give an answer or to say it depends. Like, that's the kind of the classic joke is the lawyer's answer to everything is it depends.
mhm,
But in legal holds is definitely a place where you want to fire first and ask questions later. I feel like
right.
anyway.
Right. And I mean, in my mind, I always want to fire first because I know the first thing that somebody will do if they're guilty of whatever they're being accused of is try to hide the evidence, right? So, I mean, that's our natural human instinct. Not that I would do that, of course. Just saying.
I would. Come at me, bro.
Where we see legal holds break down. So, like, once you've got through that first pre hold phase, and you've decided when it makes sense to actually like pull the trigger and go forward with your process. Legal holds can break down for a variety of reasons, and most of them have to do with preservation or the lack of preservation of data. So remember from our series one, when we talked about legal holds, that there's actually two steps in this process. There is the legal hold notice itself, which is like, yo, dude, you're on a legal hold. This is what the situation is. This is what it involves. These are your responsibilities. These are this is the data and these are the data sources that we are needing to make sure do not get deleted or purged. That's the notification process and also requires for the person on the receiving end to acknowledge it most of the time. But again, sometimes we have other circumstances where that's not necessary, like silent holds. So that's one part of the legal hold process. The other part is preserving data in place, meaning I'm going to lock Princess Donut's email down so she can't go delete everything because she knows she's being investigated. Um,
And
just
Bree's
for
making fun of me because my screen name on our recording studio is still Princess Donut.
from our previous episode. Shout out to Mary and Kelly for bringing Dungeon Crawler Carl into our life. So, like I was saying, when legal holds break down, it's usually about the lack of preservation or not preserving your data timely. There's also changes to think about when we are preserving data. And sometimes, if the legal department hasn't been clued in with other departments like compliance or ID, and they don't realize that there's data retention in place somewhere that they thought that there wasn't, and they were assuming data wasn't going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, a retention policy ran and it all got purged. Or maybe it's time for an application to sunset and we need to replace that application, or we need to perform upgrades, or we have new equipment, or we have people moving around the organization or leaving the organization. These kinds of changes, if they're not communicated and handled appropriately, can cause data to inadvertently be purged. So, those are some areas to think about when you're putting together your playbook. How are we handling those changes? What happens when Angie gets a new phone or a new computer? What happens if Bree leaves her department and gets promoted to CEO? How do we track,
You're
that
already
change? Or
CEO of your own life, Bree.
oh god, I'm doing a terrible job. Um, what happens when Angie legally changes her name to Princess Donut and her
Oh
email
my
changes?
goodness.
We need to be able to have a plan in place for what we do with that legal hold data that needs to continue being preserved. And a lot of times that makes sense to bring in other teams. In fact, when I was working in house, I went on a legal hold roadshow, as we called it, when I took off and went to different subsidiaries in our company and talked to different departments in our company, all about how we can prevent those gaps in the legal hold process so they would be aware of what our playbook options were.
The amount of vitriol I got as in-house counsel just for issuing legal holds was absolutely unhinged. Like, there
Yeah.
was this one time where we had a big class action and basically had to put the entire company on loud legal hold. I, instead of putting like the legal team alias in the signature block, it was my email signature. And I woke up the morning after we issued it and I had thousands of emails of people just like furious at me for putting them on legal hold. And I was like, bro, you're not in trouble.
Right. Part of the reason for that roadshow thing was like I needed to ease people's anxiety. Like, you're not in trouble, but you're gonna be in trouble if you don't
Yeah.
follow protocol.
Right?
So, and the other part of it too is educating departments who handled some of those changes that I was talking about earlier. Like, what happens if HR is having an exit interview and somebody's on legal hold and that person hands over their equipment? What does that HR representative do to make sure that we're not spoliating data that needs to be preserved and that we are maintaining the proper chain of custody? Same thing with, help desk people or folks in the IT department that have different responsibilities. They need to have awareness and visibility of as to what systems and what people are on legal hold. So
Yeah.
as they go through change management or whatever they're going through, updates and the like, they can also protect the company. So there's a lot of different departments that come into play. Also, if you are an international organization, you need to make sure that your privacy group or your compliance group is aware of who's on legal hold. Because if one of them says, hey, I am giving you a DSAR request, a data subject access request, and I want all of my data purged or masked, that team needs to have visibility as to who is on legal hold as well, so that we don't inadvertently redact or move or destroy data that needs to be preserved. The point being, you need to consider the entire life cycle of your legal hold and all of the different departments it's going to touch and all of the different things like these changes that can destroy your plans. Another place where things go awry with legal holds is at the very end of the legal hold when it's released. What happens? Are we closing our holds like we're supposed to? Because the process should be let's release the hold, release the data. We no longer have access to it. But a lot of times, just maybe out of busyness or maybe out of anxiety, like I don't know if the matter's over, like it might come back and be appealed or something. We're hesitant to like get rid of all of our hard work. So talking about when and how that makes sense as a team and coming up with a good plan is good because you don't want to keep your data longer than you have to.
That is true. I'm gonna come back to the questions of, like, who goes on legal hold, though, because I think that's also an important part of this decision, and it's a process called scoping when you decide who and what goes on hold. My perspective is that you shouldn't have to answer that question fresh every single time you issue a legal hold. Your playbook should have a documented scoping framework, which isn't so much like a list of names as it is a methodology. For example, like what roles are presumptively in scope for what matter types, and what the process is for identifying non obvious custodians. So, for example, when I was in house, there was a category of litigation that we had that I would consider lather, rinse, repeat. And it was a similar cast of characters for every matter. And so we knew that a hold came in and we would have to put the system admins for systems A, B, and C on hold. And then we would also have to get the person who was in charge of that particular transaction plus their support staff. And so that was our methodology for that type of litigation. And then our process for identifying non obvious custodians was a question that we had in a questionnaire that every custodian had to answer as part of their legal hold process. So that's how we identified, like, we surfaced folks who were maybe anomalous. And then there were a couple data sources that we checked to see if there were any fringe people who may have touched the transaction that we had to include. So that's my point, is have a methodology and have a means of identifying people who might not be so obvious to you. And then beyond that, I would also recommend having a process for when a custodian is also a potential witness or flight risk or someone who's historically been difficult about compliance, especially if you're at an org that maybe has repeat players who go on hold, perhaps system admins or directors or VP level people who have their fingers in a lot of different pots. You'll find that some people are more malleable and more receptive to being on legal holds than other folks. And so I recommend having, a process. Maybe that's these specific titles, like we escalate to a certain person in the legal department to issue the hold. Or what we did when I was in house is there were certain titles and certain categories of people who would receive a legal hold, not from the legal team alias, but from our VP of legal or something like that. The point is, though, these are decisions that should be made once, right? Maybe revisited periodically, but made once and thoughtfully made and then not improvised at 11 p.m. when the hold really needs to go out that day. Next topic. Let's talk about the auto delete switch because this can be the silent killer for you. There are a lot of applications that your organization is probably using that have auto delete switches in them. I'm talking Slack, Teams, email. Those we only retain this for 30 days and then it's automatically archived or automatically deleted switches. My advice for dealing with those as an organization is assign someone to butter that muffin. Most preservation plans are written for a world where data just is going to politely sit and wait for you, and that is not the case. So, your custodians are living in myriad data sources, and a lot of that is set to delete itself on a timer that's either measured in days, maybe hours sometimes, depending on its sensitivity. So, if your policy allows for those kind of disappearing messages, and plenty do for perfectly good business reasons, then your preservation plan has one job that it cannot skip, a muffin that must be buttered in every single preservation plan. It has to explain how you flip that switch off the second a trigger hits.
I love a good buttery muffin,
Oh, don't we
espe
all?
especially banana nut bread. So good.
Oh God, butter banana bread?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Banana bread muffin.
Mhm.
Mm.
I got a killer recipe, just saying.
And
Eh.
now, team, you're never going to forget to turn off those data sources, and you're probably going to get a little bit hungry when you do.
So, checklists are a great thing to include in your playbook. One of the things that you can create a checklist for are for those automatically deleting applications. We need a kill switch on that. So when a matter comes in, you're going to have an assessment to make. And it depends on the kind of matter, it depends on the people involved, it depends on the data sources involved, how you progress. But you want to have an idea in your organization first, which are the applications that are automatically erasing themselves, like text, Slacks, or Teams chats that are on a short retention cycle. So you want to know ahead of time, what are these applications that I need to be concerned with? Who are the people in my organization that would be able to assist me with either turning off whatever retention policy is there or placing that data on an in-place preservation or grabbing what's there and coming up with a plan of how we're going to continue collecting to preserve if that is the option that we need to make. And we want to go into detail about that process in the playbook. Remember, the idea is that you get to go on vacation and your people don't get to call you and ask you, how do you do that thing again that we did on that one time with that one legal hold? You're going to say, go back to your playbook, bitches, and leave me alone. I'm drinking my martinis on the beach. Okay.
Just I'm sorry, I don't have service.
Things that you're going to want to know about your applications are there any connectors that we have to them, like an API connector where we can automate different processes like in-place preservation? Yes or no. And if there are, then you want to write that process down in your playbook. For example, when I create a legal hold in my eDiscovery software, then we're using connectors within the software to automatically place data on hold in certain applications. What are those? Or is it going to be more of a manual process that I have to get somebody involved in? And who is that somebody, or what team is that somebody on? And is there some sort of ticket that I need to fill out, or some process within that department that I need to follow so that I can get what I need? Are there any limitations? What is there something I just cannot get because the way that that data is exported out of the system is maybe all mumbo jumbo code or illegible, and I don't have the tools that I need to decipher what the actual words or information is in that application. If I have something like that, do I need to employ special software? Do I need to employ an expert? What needs to happen? Like, go through the whole entire process to think to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, until you've captured and secured all of the different data sources that could potentially be on a legal hold. Another thing to consider when you're putting together these workflows for data sources is, when in the process should this step take place? If I have in place preservation automatically on a data source, I might not have to go do any collection anytime soon until we're much further along in the litigation life cycle and we're actually going through some of the discovery process of reviewing data, et cetera.
I will say
Um,
in-place preservation as in-house counsel was so nice.
yes,
It was
yes.
so wonderful. I was like, I felt like I had a legal hold butler.
I like that. Because before we had in place preservation, a lot of us were collecting to preserve, or we were getting our butt spanked for not preserving data that we should have preserved.
What kind
So,
of workplace did you work in?
oh, sorry, that was my other job. Uh, Okay, so we talked earlier about the legal hold notice itself, which is the actual notification. And I mentioned some of the things that you want to include, but your playbook should describe this in great detail. You should also think about naming conventions for your company that make sense for you. You should also think about things like fields and information that you know you want to report on, or that will be valuable for you after the fact. Like, hey, how many legal holds did we have on donuts last year? Like, I can't remember. I need to go run a report on that. Well, it's not going to be there, or it's not going to be accurate if you weren't consistent in the way that you were naming things or how you were putting together your templates and things like that. So, that's something to keep in mind. Some popular components of a legal hold, and this is something that's usually designed by the legal team, which is managed by an attorney overseeing the process. And a lot of times there will be templates for different types of matters. So, for example, you might have a template for your internal investigation, or you might have a template for a subpoena, you might have a template for litigation, or the different types of litigation might all have their own template. It's also very popular for different attorneys to have their own little library of templates because every attorney has a different style.
Although I
Um,
don't recommend that if you are issuing a legal hold from like the legal team alias. Like if that's how your company does it, I recommend a more uniform approach. But yeah, we are very persnickety beings, us attorneys.
well, I'm always for consistency because consistency means less mistakes, and also consistency is easier to prove in court.
Yeah,
Um,
way
so,
more
but
defensible.
but some popular components in a legal hold notice would include a matter name in plain English. Like, remember that you are sending this to people who are not involved in legal. They're not going to understand a bunch of jargon, and they're going to need to understand very simply what they need to do. You're going to scope the entire matter out for them and lay out specific data types, date windows that might be pertinent, application systems, other people that might be involved, etc. You're going to give them an explicit instruction to suspend routine deletion and auto purging. They also need to have an acknowledgement step. This is in a lot of different software programs. This is like going to a compliance portal where you acknowledge it. It could be as simple as reply to this email that you have received this. It just kind of depends on the sophistication of the legal hold workflow and technology that's available. A lot of times people will include a questionnaire. The questionnaire is a really great tool, and a lot of times it lays the foundation for legal folks to know who I have to go back and follow up with. And it will weed other people out, like, oh, this person doesn't really know very much about Angie's donut problem. So we're going to keep them on the hold, but we don't need anything else from them at this time.
What is
Um,
one food that you absolutely cannot resist? Is it donuts?
Oh my god, donuts is one of them for sure. I think french fries is another one.
Mine is papaya, like fresh
This
papaya.
explains our weight difference.
I would gorge myself on that.
Really?
Oh
Interesting.
my god, it is my favorite food in the entire world.
Wow, I never even knew that.
It is. It like, whenever someone's like, "What's your favorite food?" It's like, "Papaya."
That's a very healthy choice. Good
And I
job.
don't like tropical flavors generally, but I love papaya.
Do you like mango too? Because I like mango a lot.
I like mango, yeah, but I don't like I'm not gonna, like, do terrible things for a mango, but, like, I would do terrible things for a papaya.
Oh, I don't know if I do terrible things for fries. Actually,
What about, like, double battered fries, like, double fried fries?
uh, I'm sitting here thinking above both donuts and french fries are cinnamon rolls. Like, if somebody were to walk in with, like, a homemade cinnamon roll right now, I don't care what it would do to me, I would have to eat the whole thing. So, I
I
love
remember you
cinnamon
had beef
rolls.
cinnamon rolls a few months ago in your house, and it was, like, a problem for your family.
Well, here's the thing, those punks that I live with, they don't really have sweet tooths, and so when I bring home, like, cinnamon
Uh-huh.
rolls, they kinda like, "No, I mean, it's good," but then they don't eat the leftovers. So then they just stare at me on the counter like, "Hello, you remember how good we were together? You could just put me
Don't
in the
don't
microwave with
leave me
some
like
butter."
this. All half-eaten, I feel naked.
Yeah, and Lord knows I do not need to be eating any cinnamon rolls. But anyway, before we move on from the you hold notice that you want to make sure with those questionnaires, see if you want to have a follow-up interview process. Think about each of these different steps in terms of how is it going to play out? Is this going to be something that we manually are doing? Is this something that we can automate? And then what does that look like and what needs to happen? A good place in your playbook for screenshots so that it's very descriptive and somebody in 5th grade can come through and work through your playbook and know exactly what to do.
Yeah, when you're drafting it, one thing we did when I was in house is I would send it to somebody from, like, a totally different department, like, non-legal, and be like, "Does this make sense to you?
Mhm.
Does our playbook make sense?" And they would either be like, "Yes" or "No," and if it didn't, I would try to rewrite it so that it was clearer. Because I feel like lawyers get into this really bad habit. We use a lot of, like, heretofores and whence and stuff like that, you right? Like these like propped up, wordy, kind of antiquated phrases. And it's like, nah, we don't need that. Nobody's gonna read that. Which kind of leads me to my next point, which is you should just talk like a real person in your legal hold. Writing a doc for a non-lawyer who's mildly annoyed that you're in their inbox at all is way different than writing a motion for summary judgment or something. So when I was thinking about how to draft our legal hold templates, to me it wasn't, is this legally sufficient? That was just sort of table stakes, right? To me, what I was shooting for was, will a busy sales director read this once and know precisely what to do? My North Star was specificity is kindness. Your Slack, email, Teams chats from January 2023 to today will beat all electronically stored information every single time for a layperson because one of those tells someone what to do and the other sends them like straight to delete, right? I mean, how often do you receive an email that you don't understand and you're like, let me really get to the bottom of this? Yeah, I'm just going to be like, well, this isn't worth my time. Never mind. But if I understand exactly what I'm supposed to do, suddenly I feel an obligation to do it. The other thing that we did that I would highly recommend is we had a couple FAQ pages that we would hyperlink in our legal hold templates. So we would have one that was, what is a legal hold? What is litigation? What does it mean? And then for our really big cases, we might have one that was specific to that case, especially if it was one that was being heavily covered by the press or something like that. We wanted to like allay some people's concerns.
Along those same lines, and I know this is a feature in our software too that is very popular, you can automate, different reminders along the way if you know you've got a hold where you're like, "Dude, this is gonna be like God and everybody on this hold, and they're gonna forget about it, and there's a high chance that they are going to purge data on accident," then maybe you send them, every quarter a reminder or every month a reminder. Hey, just letting you know, as a reminder, you're still on hold, and these are all the things you need to be thinking about. You've got those kinds of options. Also, there's automation that you could employ that does things like, "Hey, person, This is your first legal hold that you've ever gotten. Now go, if you're confused, go read these links that Angie was talking about that teach you about what a legal hold is. Or maybe, and one thing I did with our legal hold roadshow, part of that was creating training for our entire organization within our LMS program. So it was part of onboarding when somebody came to work at our company. This is a training on what your legal hold is. So perhaps one of those links you refer them back to is that link. But anyway, just saying yes and to you, Angie.
I love it when you do that to me. Um, I'm gonna pivot us to talk about departing and departed custodians as we get ready to depart this episode. And talk about employees who change teams or roles, which is not something that Brie or I will ever do because we are with you and each other forever. Anywho, my North Star for all these folks, departing and departed custodians and folks who change roles, you have to preserve their data. Like, you just must. It is a requirement and fact of life. I've noticed that a lot of legal hold programs might omit what to do when somebody leaves or changes roles, which is, it kind of makes sense, right? It's often the matter's ongoing, things are sort of trucking along. It's easy to sort of forget this step because something more exciting like a deposition is happening. But this is, an, in fact, quite important thing to do. The day somebody on an active matter who's actively on hold gives notice, a clock starts ticking because the default corporate reflex is just reclaim the laptop, wipe the device, shut off the account, reissue it. Fast and efficient. That reflex is potential spoliation every single time. It's good IT hygiene, but bad legal hold hygiene. And it's worse with people who have already gone. They might have data in a decommissioned mailbox. They might have data on their BYOD phone. Plug for our next episode right there. And if you just purge everything as a matter of course, you're going to lose data that might be critical to your case, either proving it or defending against it, or might land you in spoliation hot water. That is a governance gap, and it means it's somebody's job to preserve it. And your playbook's real test is whether it actually names whose job it is.
Yeah, we've been trying to emphasize the fact that you need to think about every aspect of your workflow as you're putting together this playbook. When we're talking about assessing or managing employee change, we want to walk through in our playbook what actually happens when somebody resigns or terminates. Like, what literally happens? Is there something that needs to be communicated with HR, with IT, with legal, with the person's manager? What kind of notification do they need? What kind of tickets need to be within ServiceNow or within your IT ticketing system that will help inform everyone that will be involved with the offboarding of this employee? Is there education that you need to give to your HR reps about what a chain of custody is and how to fill it out so that then when they're getting employees' devices, that you are actually managing that process in a defensible way? And then there's decisions that need to be made with those devices. What are we going to do with Angie's laptop and her mobile device when she hits the singo bingo big and gets to retire early? What are we going to do with our old stuff? Are we going to sit on it? We're going to throw it in a box in a drawer somewhere and it's just going to accumulate. And then all of a sudden one day somebody's going to be like, bro, why do we have hundreds of mobile devices and laptops sitting around? Probably not the best idea. You need to have a process for that. Are you going to keep the entire device? Are you going to image it? A good idea, by the way, is to not keep the entire device. One reason being that it wastes space. Another reason being that it's hard to keep organized whose is what's. Like, don't be putting post-it notes on there that 5 years later fall off.
Dude, I
Also,
literally found a closet full of laptops with Post-it
yes,
notes on them at a job once, and I was like,
yes.
"Oh,
Happened to me
no."
too. Yes, and I got the job of, like, trying to figure out what Post-it notes went with what laptops, and I'm like, "This is a nightmare."
Oh my god.
Also, you don't know what year those laptops were issued and what kind of encryption they have on them, so then you gotta, like, send it all out to an expert to have it decrypted, and it's a freaking mess. So, if you actually need to save that data on the device, probably should image it and keep an electronic copy of it and get rid of the actual device itself.
I'm gonna butt in and tell a quick story because
Yeah.
sometimes this can get really messy. Like, I had a situation once where it was so expensive to actually pull data off of the devices. It was like $1,000 a device to pull data off. And these devices were on hold and they kept trickling in as employees resigned because our company was going to get acquired. So people are resigning left and right, and everyone's still on legal hold. And so we have, and it was MacBooks specifically that kept stacking up because they're more difficult, right? At some point, we were like, okay, we have to sit down and think critically about this tension between we aren't redeploying these machines, the amount of money it would cost to pull data off of them and preserve, versus its relevance to the litigation and the likelihood that all the data on them is stored in the cloud already and we don't actually need to go get it. And also, what's our worst day in court if that data does get spoliated? What does that look like? So we had to
Mhm.
consider all those factors and figure out what to do. Meanwhile, laptops are piling up and piling up and piling up.
Which is exactly why you wanna save yourself that heartache when you're putting together your eDiscovery playbook, and go ahead and keep all those considerations in mind. Answer those questions from the get-go, and then you know how to proceed with the device, because what Angie's describing is not uncommon at all, that becomes a problem, and it can grow very quickly. It's also a good idea once you have gotten to a place like this in the playbook preparation, that you enlist the help of folks that are actually carrying through with some of these employee changes. Sit down with the IT folks that have a checklist that they follow when somebody offboards. Make sure that their process has a place in it to check whether they're on legal hold. And then if that is true, that process is listed in your playbook of what needs to happen next. Lots of things to consider there with employee change. Where another place where we can see employment change that's hard to manage on a legal hold is if you've got an entire group of people, like an entire department is on a legal hold, and you're trying to track, like, hey, when do we have a new employee in that department? We need to make sure that they are being out of that legal hold and that they realize their responsibilities as well. Scoping that out and figuring out a process that works for you, then and explaining that in detail in your playbook is a good thing to do. Another change that's outside of the employment change is when we start talking about systems and applications. You know, applications, just like devices, get old, they have updates, they sometimes sunset and sometimes are replaced with a newer, better model. What happens when there's data on those applications that are on legal hold? Again, talking with your change management folks in IT and understanding their process, making sure that their process has a legal hold stop that they have to consider, the legal team and whatever parameters that they need to be aware of setting so that they're not accidentally getting rid of data on legal hold. Good conversations to have. And once you have those conversations, spelling it out in your playbook is a good idea as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The only other thing I would add in this case is having something in your playbook about when to release holds. It's important that you do that. Otherwise, your data is just going to remain preserved indefinitely, which can cause problems later on. That might change case to case, right? For example, when I was in house for subpoenas, we said third party subpoenas. We were like, okay, we will produce. And then 2 weeks later, we will send a letter that says, unless we hear from you in 30 days, we're releasing our legal hold on this. And then we would do that, lather, rinse, repeat. For different litigation, it might be when the case settled, then we would release the legal hold when the settlement agreement was like finally executed. Sometimes it would be, when money had actually exchanged hands post settlement agreement. And then for cases that settle or for cases that were disposed of on motions practice or something, we would have to calculate the appeals period. Same thing with like preservation letters. We would calculate the statute of limitations for all the claims that we could see in those letters. And then we would release the hold when the statute of limitations had run on those claims. So, point being, have something in your playbook about when to release the legal hold.
When you decide, hey, this is when we're going to purge our data and legal hold, when we're going to release the legal hold, make sure it's well documented in your playbook. And the reason why is if you have purged data and that again comes up and your honor wants to know why you didn't keep it, you're going to explain that we have a consistent workflow in our playbook that's been documented and this is what we do consistently. To make sure that you're following that consistently, I would have some sort of auditing going on, like reporting that you do every month or every quarter or whatever, to make sure that you don't have any legal holds that fit into those descriptions that you've laid out that actually need to be released.
We always had a quarterly meeting about it. Like it was our legal hold release meeting. We would meet every quarter.
Very smart idea.
Oh, well, thank you, Bree. I was really just looking for your stamp of approval there. All right, listeners, that is part 2 of our playbook series. If you've been taking notes, and I hope you have, or at least have access to a rewind button, you now have a pretty comprehensive view of what your playbook needs to say about triggers and holds, where the clock starts, how to survive the pre litigation window, and how to run a hold from issuance all the way through release without it falling apart in the middle, or so we hope. Part 3 is where you're going to bring your own device policies. Then we're going to go into what a playbook says about collection, processing, review, outside counsel, vendor management, privilege, and settlement authority. In other words, we are going to talk about all things eDiscovery and litigation playbook. So, subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. And please review our podcast. Give us 5 stars if you don't mind so that we can reach more people like you. Also, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Hit us up on eDiscoveryChicks.com. And if this series is making you want to go build or overhaul your playbook, good. That's the whole point. Tag us when you do. Bye.
Bye. The views we've expressed today are the eDiscovery Chicks views and don't necessarily represent the views of our employers, partners, or clients. The podcast is available solely for educational purposes to provide general information about eDiscovery principles and not to provide legal advice to any specific situation. It is not a substitute for legal advice from a lawyer you retained or who has agreed to represent you.